while you see great teams, there's not always an obvious formula. And one of my favorite coaches, he talks about the fact that we're not trying to design a way to get back to good teamwork. Like, organizations have generally never landed and sustained the formula for teamwork at all. So we're all still trying to explore what is going to work, and when does it work, and for who does it work for.
You don't have to grind it out 60, 80 hours a week in order to be successful these days. And I think it's a really good point you make. There's got to be that balance, because if you're operating at 25%, you're not doing anybody any good anyway, right?
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.
Welcome back to Unfinished Business, everybody. I'm rolling. I did my hot yoga today, Dane. You ever do hot yoga? Do you do hot yoga?
No, but I love the concept. I spend a lot of time in the sauna, so for me, just getting the blood flowing,
there you go.
Makes a big difference.
Doing the heat. I've been doing hot yoga for like 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And when I originally started doing it, it was like, all right, I gotta, it was all about the workout, right? It was all about the workout. And then I figured out after about 10 years that it really wasn't. It's all about the mind, like what's it here. And because you have this, and now for me, it's about calming, like being able to handle the heat and the chaos, but keep your mind focused on what you're doing without losing your shit.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned through this. And then the biggest thing I was thinking about today, which was interesting, is kind of like what you're talking, like what we're going to talk about today, what you specialize in. When the class is synergistically, because the class I do, my wife teaches a lot, and I was lucky enough to take her class today, but she does the same sequence each time. So a lot of the people who are there, like, do the sequence, they understand it. And when they're in line, and everybody's kind of moving at the same pace and the same cadence, the energy in the class like kicks up,
right. Yeah.
which is really, the heat kicks up too, because there's a lot of people there, but the energy kicks up too. And which is kind of some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, which I'm excited to jump into. So anyway, that's me blabbing, but thanks for being here on the show. I'm going to introduce you here in a second. So Dane Groeneveld is the CEO and founding partner of Lead3r. Okay, you got to check this out. But more importantly, we're going to talk about his philosophy, the work that this guy is doing, and really impacting professionals across the world, for that matter. So we'll dig into this today, hear about his story, hear about the workplace challenges, hear about the engaging and empowerment of really building a workforce in a workplace these days, especially with people remote, right? So without further ado, Dane, thanks again for being here on the show. Look forward to having you.
Thanks, David. I'm super excited. I love your energy. Yeah. I'm pumped on the hot yoga. I'm going to have to go give that a bit more of a shot. And
it'll break you down, brother. It'll break you down, but it'll build you back up. I promise.
Love it.
All right, listen. You've got a super big passion for teamwork, unlocking professionals' potential. Just give us a little bit of insight of what sparked this whole deal for you.
Yeah, cool. I grew up moving a lot as a kid. My dad was a mining engineer, so we'd move from town to town early in life. And so you kind of find yourself getting thrown into different classrooms, different teams. And I realized just the power of those good teams when you had that moment on a rugby team or swimming team or whatever. There's just this energy, kind of like you shared on the hot yoga, like when everyone gets going, everyone gets in this groove. It's just better for everyone. And it's not just the work you're doing, it's the energy you take home to your family and friends. It's the connection in the community. It just has this multiplier effect. So I've always been fascinated by the energy of good teams. I was lucky growing up, in Australia at first. There's a big sports culture. Then I moved to the UK, finished out school there, started my career there, and have actually worked all over the world, putting teams into a lot of different industrial environments, building, large facilities, very multicultural. And, while you see great teams, there's not always an obvious formula. And one of my favorite coaches, he talks about the fact that we're not trying to design a way to get back to good teamwork. Like, organizations have generally never landed and sustained the formula for teamwork at all. So we're all still trying to explore what is going to work.
Figure it out, right?
And when does it work, and for who does it work for?
So 2 things. When I want to back up, did you play rugby?
Yeah, big time. Fun sport.
Let me tell you something, okay? Because I played American football.
Yeah,
that's nothing. Because we had the pads, we had the helmet, we had all that. You guys are rolling without any pads, knocking each other around, and it's a fascinating sport. I haven't followed it too much, but I've seen it because I attract to that kind of stuff. But so you played for a while, huh?
Yeah, I played for a good bit in school and in university, and it was a lot of fun. And now I still coach. I coach my son's team.
Coach? Oh, that's great!
It's one of my favorite parts of the week.
That's great. And then my second, more of a comment, but you're right. Like, there's no like magic formula, right? Like, there's no playbook for this thing. I mean, to a certain extent, I'm sure there's techniques and things to promote people within, but talk to me about like your strategy going in and looking in an organization. And we're going to get more granular as we go along, but do you have conceptually, what is your belief in this and building up professionals and building organizations? Because it is not easy. I've seen really good ones. I've seen ones that have been terrible. And what is the big difference between those?
I mean, it's a big reason why I started my podcast, The Future of Teamwork, because I've got my approach, but it changes all the time. Like, it works with one team and then something will change. You lose a customer, COVID comes, you do an acquisition, and it all shuffles again. What I'm finding, the more people I interview and the more I learn from others, the more I have my own failures and successes, is that there is a methodology that works for me. It may not work for other leaders, but I've got a sense that it could be quite universal. And the first part of my methodology is all just around showing up as a leader. So we've got a framework for that.
And what, as leaders, like, what's the most important piece when you say showing up? What do you really mean?
So for me, showing up it can't just be about the work that you do or the knowledge that you have. It's the way you connect with your people, with your customers, with your vendors. And we've really built it out on an acronym. So we call it, the first part show is story or strategy, health, outside influences, and then work. So I can easily walk through, how I apply those things and where I see that.
Yeah.
So for me, the story or strategy, like, let's say you're a leader and you've just joined a new team, new company. The worst thing you can do is jump in and kind of say, well, what work do we do here? And, tell me a bit more about the systems and that. You need to have a bit of a story straight away, because that's what humans connect with. So I've always thought, like, coming in and saying, look, my name's Dane. I'm here as the new leader. And my goal is to really expand the way that we're doing business with our customers in these ways. This is where I've come from in the past. This is what excites me. And in order to do that, I need to know more about you. Tell me a bit more about your story. So that's just a very easy starting point from a communication connection standpoint. And if you do that kind of listening tour as a leader, whether you're new into a business or you've moved departments or you've got a new project ahead of you, just starting with story just gives everyone a little bit of alignment. You don't have to get too fancy on, like, here's our purpose.
Right.
Like, just have your story. And be open to letting that change. Like, strategy once upon a time was a whole bunch of people lock themselves in a room and come up with their story and then cascade it down. But the reality is your team members now, even some of your vendors, partners, customers, they're going to inform you of what's changing in the world because it's changing so fast. So I think by telling your story, by asking for their story, you're going to find where that real magic's going to be for the team. So that's the S of showing up.
Yep. That's great, man. That's great. So I always talk about this organizational alignment, right? The transfer of knowledge or the story. Do you see it? It's probably a dumb question, but I'm asking anyway. Do you see it a lot being overlooked in really identifying what the true story is of the organization, and what's the best way to transfer that between departments, especially people like who've been there, right? You'll see companies evolve, right? Well, I've been here 14 or 15 years, right? And the organization changes. So the story when they started is a little bit different. They've seen it evolve. But how do you transfer that wealth of knowledge between departments and sometimes through generations, right?
Oh, 100%. And big shifts. So
Yeah.
I think it's about getting everyone to be telling a common story. I think that's what actually a guest of my podcast, Patrick Sliman, he was on just this week. He talked about compounding trust. And you compound trust when if 3 different people in the organization can all share a very similar story, it becomes the reality, and it kind of exudes positivity and excitement out into the customers and the rest of the team. So you've almost got to be always storytelling in the business and always doing these kind of conversations in the business, which sadly not many leaders, not many teams make time for because everyone's busy doing their work and they don't think that the storytelling is part of the work.
Yeah, it's so true. It's funny. I do this exercise with my sales organizations, and we'll bring in the CEO, obviously some executive leaders, but I do this exercise called the power statement. Okay.
Cool. Tell me more.
Yeah, the power statement's really geared around what challenges does this company solve for their prospects or their customers? Okay. How do they do it? And what makes them different? Now it's a little deeper than that because it's amazing how it starts off. It starts out so like everybody, you'll go to one person, they'll have their version, they'll have another person's version. And all of a sudden, as you're working through this thing, it starts aligning. And it almost starts becoming an anthem, and it starts bleeding over to the marketing. It starts bleeding over to the email messaging. But it's very similar, I think, what you're talking about with the story here. It's actually probably identical, but more in a and what happens is, and what I really try to encourage and impress upon the sales organizations that I work with is start speaking your prospects or your customers' language, right? When you can lead with challenges versus how great you are. And here's what we do. And we've been in business since 1965. And that's not what they want to hear. They want to know how you can help them, how you do it, and really what makes you different from the other 10 people that probably called them before and the other 10 that are going to call them after. And I think if you have that kind of dialogue, that it speaks to the story of what you're talking about here.
It does. I love that power statement. I haven't used it before, but it makes total sense to me. And I think that's great when you're looking at an organization and selling. But if all your job as a leader is to come in and replace a technology program in the finance function, then you need a power statement for your function, for your project.
Right. Great point.
You got to think about, how am I serving the team members? How are the team members going to benefit from this new financial system?
I love that.
So it's really getting into the teams, because to me, organizations are really just networks of teams. It's hard to operate at the organizational level, particularly the bigger you go. So it's fun.
Yeah, I love that. Because I've just been so engaged in the sales arms of organizations and operationally, but each department should have their own power statement, right? To go into. I love this. I love it. Great. I'm cool. So you're gonna take some of mine. I'm gonna take some of yours.
Yeah, let's keep sharing. That's why I love these podcasts.
I love it, man. I love it.
So that's kind of that's the story piece, and then I always jump into health because if you get that story going, that power statement going, as a leader, you've got to be looking at your own health, because leaders tend to get burnt out and overwhelmed in today's modern age of work, and that's not just health at home, health at fitness. It's holistic health. And then you got to look at the team's health, because if you're going through this big change and you've got this story which is galvanizing direction, but you're not having tough conversations, you're not being considerate and caring of the impact that this change is going to have on different people, then you're just inviting fracture and challenge and obstacles.
Because you're just pushing it down the throat. But I love it. Health is a big one, because whether physically, mentally, especially if you're running an organization, and we'll talk, and even if you're not even running an organization, but you're leading a department where you just want to up your game, you just got to have, I'm a big believer in mind, body, and spirit. I mean, you got to have that balance. And sometimes we get listen, we all can fall off track, right? We can get lopsided, but I think that's a great point. Great
I
point.
definitely get lopsided. Like my default that I work on with my coach is that, having grown up with a dad that was a mining engineer executive, a big mining business, I just always saw him working really hard.
Yeah.
So my kind of belief is that to be a successful executive, you've got to work really hard. And actually, sometimes that goes completely against the grain of health for me and for my team, because you burn each other out, or you push too hard at the wrong moment.
Yeah. I've learned, the older when I was younger, I was like, burn through it. And I love it because my wife puts me in check sometimes too, because I love getting at it. Right. Like I play to win. So but you're right, man. There's this, you don't have to grind it out 60, 80 hours a week in order to be successful these days. And I think it's a really good point you make. There's got to be that balance, because if you're operating at 25%, you're not doing anybody any good anyway, right?
Yeah. You're not.
Yeah.
You're definitely not. You're definitely not.
Yeah. So that's great. That's great. All right, next.
We then
So
go into
health.
outside influence. So story, strategy, health, and outside influence. I think in today's age of like technology and sharing through social media and everything else that's going on, it's really easy to be like blinkers on. I'm doing my work and I've got all of these tools, but getting out into the community, know more about your customer, know more about your competitors, take ideas and inspiration from other industries. Maybe it's the way that the chef at your favorite restaurant runs the restaurant. Like, what are they doing that makes your experiences in life so great, and how could you bring some of that into your team? So this outside in capability, I think, is exciting. It helps you as a leader. It helps your team say, hey, we don't have it all right, and let's make it a team sport to go out and look for things that might make it just that little bit better.
Technology right now, especially, I mean, it's a great time to be alive in this stuff with how things are just shaping the workplace right now. Do you see any tools or platforms that you believe are, effective enough in fostering like that collaboration or innovation within teams? I mean, you got anything, since we're on the subject? I thought I'd ask the question.
Cool stuff out there. Yeah, there's some cool stuff. I mean, one of my great friends, Eric Enright, he's actually a technology CEO, and he talks about, it's not the tool that matters, it's how you use the tool. So I think the reality is you could use Word or Excel and make amazing things happen in teams just to share information. But for me, and from what I'm seeing from like my teams and how they like to play, definitely we're getting a lot of leverage out of Microsoft Teams or Slack for those people. But if you use that in the right way, if you set up your channels correctly, and if you share, shout outs or information or, surveys or pictures, that can really help with some of the connective tissue of teamwork. It beats the hell out of email. There's no doubt.
Like what we're doing right now, video. Like I adopted
Video's
this.
huge.
It was. So I remember like during COVID, and I started adopting this. We're grinding through it. Those were tough days because everything was changing so rapidly. And at the end of the day, I'd be like exhausted. And the last thing I want to do is put out this long email to everybody, like what was going on with the organization. So I stumbled across this program called Loom.
Love Loom. And I was going to go there next. That's a great call.
Yeah. And I was like, listen, they don't want to read a long email. I'm just going to go through the points on Loom and just put a video out and tell them what's going on. And I started using this, and then I started using it across, consulting, and it's a great program and just so easy to use, and you can build these libraries. And anyway, so sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I agree with Loom. Yeah. I mean, we use Teams a lot for video, but Loom's a brilliant video platform. I think Loom's better than Teams because, and Atlassian do some great work in the whole space of teamwork anyway. They're really broadening out. So if you're not looking at Atlassian products, I'm always a big fan of theirs. But the cool thing about Loom, as you've probably seen, David, is if you create your video, then people can go and comment on parts of the video.
Yes.
You can create asynchronous interaction. So it's not just like, hey, turn on Netflix and watch a show. And people can even upload their own videos to say, hey, I love that you said that, David, and here's an example of how I asked a customer for a referral today, and this is how it made me feel. So I think just creating those reasons to be connecting with each other and finding commonality. Loom's a brilliant product.
Yeah, it really is. Especially everyone loves the videos now, and I think it's one of the best ways to communicate these days, just based on how technology has gone across the board. But that's fantastic. Great.
The only other tool I'd throw in there, after my Teams and Loom, would be Mural, which I use for visual planning. You can use Miro, there's others, but Mural's my favorite. And think of it like a whiteboard that's in the cloud, and you can get really creative. You can upload files, Excel sheets and PowerPoints. You can put links in from different websites. You can put LinkedIn profiles in. You can get really visual in how you do mind mapping. They've got tons of templates. And I find it to be a bit of a superpower, because if you're working in a team, particularly a hybrid team or a remote team, it's you lose sometimes that ability to just get creative and play. So Mural creates a way to play in your work and create a space that you can come in and out of, which isn't heavy documentation, and everyone can kind of build their own piece of the puzzle. So I find it super cool.
I'm checking it out right now online, and it looks like, I mean, absolutely. This is cool. It's like a whiteboard that everybody can kind of, again, I could be off, but a whiteboard everybody can kind of add and take away or make notes for a project. Well, this is really cool. Check it out.
Cool. Yeah, it's a very cool product. So they'd be my big three on tech.
Cool. Love that. All right, next one.
The last one in that whole show up methodology is work. Now, as leaders, particularly in the information age, it's very easy to get drawn into your work being looking at spreadsheets, running sales meetings, talking to shareholders. But actually, it's really important that you find part of your work that you can do in the team, like jump down in the trenches and do it. Now, as a leader, that's going to change from time to time or seasonally. If you're in the retail industry, maybe that means that you're getting out into some of the shop floors and working with the teams to restock or to, be at big sales events. If you're a sales leader, maybe it's not being out with customers. Maybe it's actually coming back in and working with the finance team to do some trend analysis, but really get in the room and do the work with them rather than ask for the product. And what I find that helps you to do, particularly if you're trying to build that team muscle, is that it just creates a little bit more sense of mattering across the team. People are like, hang on a minute, the boss is in here working with me. They're seeing me do my best work. They're asking me questions. I'm bringing value. And it's just very cool. I think it's very important.
Yeah, man. And right, because then you get someone who's in there with them. And again, that's fostering that leadership within, because the team likes engaging. The person who's also the leader also likes engaging. I think it really does set the tone. It's really good. So, all right. Show it is, everybody. Run those back, listen to those, because it's a real great framework. We touched on this a little bit, okay, but the rise of remote work, hybrid models, obviously with technology advancement, things coming on board. I mean, you nailed out a few of these things on the technology side, but what are the biggest shifts that you're seeing right now? Because there was this big shift, remote work. Now there's this shift going back where, hey, we want people in, and I think what's going to happen for organizations is they're going to have to meet in the middle. But what's your feedback on this?
So I've got a big dream on where I think it should go, which I'll come back to later. But I think right now, I think return to office is difficult full time. Some companies will pull it off and they'll be very intentional about it, and there's reasons to do it. Some businesses never left the office other than the short period of COVID shutdown. So it definitely works. But if you're a business where some degree of hybrid or fully remote is important, I think that there are some near-term opportunities to leverage. And the teams that I see doing it best, they're really making intentional time for when they connect, because we're living in this world where human connection is low. We've got this loneliness epidemic going on, and we've all survived for the last 5 years. I wouldn't necessarily say we've all thrived. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of relationship fallout. There's a lot of just kind of, I'll be really honest, there's a lot of like checking out and boredom and like, oh, here's the tool we use and this is what we do and I'm going to do what I need to do. And it's okay. I'll make it up to myself by going for a surf or going for a walk in the park. But that's not good. That's not what good teamwork should look like. So I think the teams that are doing it well are creating those times in the day when they'll have meetings, the times in the day when they'll do collaborative work. They're finding ways to get together, whether it's at a conference or whether it's at a shared workspace or whether they do an annual retreat. And I think continuing to invest in that human connection, it gives them that connective tissue to be able to share that corporate knowledge transfer, build on those stories and compound that trust within the team around what we're doing, what we're working on, how it helps our customers. And I also think it just, going back to my health part of the acronym, it helps you make sure that people are healthy, that you're there not just for them in the tasks that they do for you, but for where they're trying to go in their life.
Yeah. So what you're saying is really be more intentional about your meetings versus just saying, hey, we're going to have another meeting on this, but being more intentional on the collaboration, because everybody, they come up with these ideas like, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we have to accomplish. Go on your own way. Right. But what you're saying is take it a level further and have a meeting where you're actually doing the collaborative work versus talking about the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even this is a crazy one. Let's have a meeting to talk about how we're working. Right.
Okay, great.
Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once a quarter, but let's get in there and say, where are we creating confusion, tension, frustration in our work? Because we're all in different places. We don't see it in the day. Like once upon a time, you'd look out on the floor and you'd see someone, arms crossed, frustrated, talking to a colleague, and you'd walk over and be like, hey guys, how's it going today? What are we running into? You don't see that anymore. So you need to be able to create intentionality around where is that confusion or conflict in the business and how can we collectively name it, tag it, and then deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the common most misconception about, teamwork in this modern business environment that we have from what you've seen?
I think that we've become a little bit enamored with being able to define good processes and build good tools. We've all got technology for everything. Yeah. And actually, I think the misconception there is that it's working well, where reality is lots of people are doing tons of workarounds and carrying stress and frustration because work gets done in a certain way. I don't like using that tool, but we just invested in a 3-year software license. So the boss isn't going to repeal that. So how are we going to work with what we've got? So there's that stuff I think is really bogging down teamwork.
Yeah. Yeah. So rather than helping it, you're seeing too many different things and juggling like 5 different basketballs and trying to come up with how these all integrate. And then I couldn't even imagine the onboarding process of all that too, right? Like it's just, it's got to be super challenging.
Swim for a lot of remote. Yeah. I mean, I believe it's GitLab. I can't remember which one, but they do a brilliant job of documenting everything. So when you get onboarded, there is a clear process and there are clear forums to deal with what you need. But in a lot of other businesses, particularly, there's so many small to medium businesses here in the US and around the world. It's kind of like, hey, jump in and, here's some logins and go see what you can do. Maybe there's a very basic desktop procedure, but onboarding, I think it's a great call out, David. It's something that can create a lot of energy or it can create a lot of sort of draining of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think you bring up a huge point, which just came up recently. I don't know, maybe I was actually doing a training session yesterday with an organization and we were talking about documentation and they're like, they were feeling bad. They're a company that is starting to grow up. They're a teenager right now. And they're like, we don't have any, SOPs and they were like freaking out about it. I said, this is normal. This is like, you start building an organization and they've done a fantastic job. They've gone to like 0 to 4 million in like 4 years, which is great. Okay. Yeah. But they're recognizing now that they've got to have the SOPs. They're looking at integration. And it's natural if you're a smaller company and you don't have this stuff. But I do recommend document it. Like document everything that you have, or have your team document. Not because you want to say, hey, we're watching you. We want to know what you're doing, but you want to make things better, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll identify things that can improve. And realistically too, as a growing organization, not everybody's going to stay with you.
No, they're not. They're
Right.
not. And also, there's on-the-job training, best practice diffusion. I liked your Loom example. I think what we're working with a sales coach right now, and he's like, record all of your sales calls, and then put in the library your best sales calls, and be like, when you onboard someone, hey Jenny, go and watch these 3 sales calls. This is how it worked out great. And if you've done it on Loom, you can actually have people jumping in saying, hey, I love the way you did that at this stage, David.
Yeah.
So I think documenting process can now include video. And gosh, I mean, AI is starting to play too. You document process, you throw it into AI, you record meetings, you ask it to summarize, what the call structure is. There's so much that small businesses can do pretty cost effectively.
Yeah, I love that as well. And it is important because it was something, I tell the story years back. I had a mentor when I was very, very early into my first business, my sales business. And he was down in Florida. I was in Phoenix at the time. And he asked me to record my presentation. And it changed the whole trajectory of my career. But I did it. I had this little tape on my mantle, those little plastic tapes.
Yeah.
Okay. I did it with sticking a recorder, a little thing into my presentation folder. And he listened. I recorded like 5 presentations, sent them down to him, and he listened to it. And actually his analysis changed the whole trajectory of my career at that point. So what's great about it today is you have all this technology that, like, self-analyzation is a tough thing to do. I will always say that it is very hard. But you will grow in leaps and bounds if you do that. And not just in the sales world, but also, again, documentation of what you're doing in your department. You may identify areas of improvement. So I think
that reminds me too, on identifying areas of improvement. We had a lady on the podcast, Julia Markish, and she talked about ride-along days. And I was like, what's a ride-along day? I've never heard of that. And she's like, hey, just imagine Dane and David are getting together to have a sales meeting. They're going to look at the sales pipeline, or they're going to actually talk to a customer. And what happens if you go and ask Jenny from the accounting team or from HR to just come and sit and like observe the meeting? And at the end of the meeting, you ask, hey, Jenny, what did you see? What was confusing? What was exciting? And it's amazing, just that perspective of another team member who hasn't got all the biases and the built-in expectations. That's just like, it really confused me when you guys started talking about price at this point in the conversation. Can you tell me a bit more about what that was and why you do it that way? And that sort of uncertainty actually becomes a bit of a weapon for identifying improvement opportunities.
So true, man. It's so true. And I would always say this, especially when I was building my last organization and even organizations I work with now. I'd love to take somebody on the inside, let's call it an operational person, and put them out with a sales team member for a week. Yep. And then I would love to take a sales team member and I'd love to put them in the seat of a inside support or an operations person to see what they go through a week. Like, you would get such a perspective. I mean, it's not realistic, but maybe that hour, maybe that half hour, maybe that call or listening to that call really does translate. And it's really huge between marketing and sales. I just had a guest on last week who's a specialist in really bridging the gap between marketing and sales, because marketing is like, we're getting all these leads and they're not closing any deals. And then sales is like, well, we're getting these leads, but they're all crap. But they're not, again, they're not in sync. So I think that's definitely a perspective that it's not easy. It is not easy. Where have you seen like the strong, you don't have to name the company, but where have you seen one of the strongest work cultures that you've worked with or even developed for that matter? And what was it that was the differentiator between them being really, really good versus another company that might be average or even below average?
Yeah, I think my personal experiences have been building teams from the ground up where everyone had to just muscle in and build certain processes, come through certain milestones together. That created a lot of sort of epiphany effect. Like, everyone was like, oh, we can do this. And I understand where Jenny's role is and where David's role is and where Bob's role is. That created a huge amount of cultural strength and awareness and support. So I've always enjoyed, doing those builds. I would say in the customer sphere, when I see cultures that are just insane, it's often those cultures where they're just remarkably clear around what they're doing, who they work with, and more importantly, who they're serving in their daily role. If you're clear on who you're serving, whether that's an internal function or an external customer, and even better, if you can actually see the result of your work in their work, that creates really cohesive culture.
Yeah. That's it. That brings such a funny story to me because I was in San Diego. My son's in the Navy and he's in San Diego, so we were out there I think back in October, and they have this huge aircraft carrier, the Midway, the SS Midway, you can go through. Okay, they've got
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, right? And they have these volunteers the guys who have been in the military, they've been in the Navy, who were in one place or another in the Navy. And I was just walking around. There was a guy sitting there on a stool, and I was kind of admiring the big area we were in where they had all the planes and the lower level. And long and short, as I said, man, I said, this is like running a city. And I asked him, I said, I don't know, how could you be how can you run this thing the most effectively? Being in the military, being on a ship like this. And he goes, well, listen, I was on the ship. And I was like, really? I was like, well, tell me more. He goes, we ran by 3 C's. And I said, all right, well, tell me the C's. He said, the first one was you had to be very clear on what the objective was.
Yeah.
So, great. Fantastic. Because you had the cooks down here, you had the planes going off up here, and then you're running planes off the top of this thing, right? And then the second thing we had to do was communicate. So once we were clear on what we needed to do, we needed to communicate what was going on up to that point. Did you need to make adjustments? And then the third C was conquer. And I thought that was so good because you just want to conquer, right? Like based on your mission or what you have to do.
Yeah.
So I thought it was such a cool way of having a quick conversation about this guy. Yeah, it was a really cool framework that is obviously, running a ship like that with thousands and thousands of military operating people, and they're flying planes off it, they're cooking, it's just amazing to me. So I thought that was a real interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, and a lot of people, it's really interesting, the whole concept of clarity, because it often gets confused with micromanagement. So it's like, well, I don't want to tell David exactly how he needs to do his job. And it's like, well, that's not what clarity is. Clarity is like, hey, David, within these boundaries, you need to do your job however you best see fit so that we get to this point and we can go and conquer. And so I think people get stuck. Another friend, Rachel Yanas, who talks about the science of leadership, she says like leaders fall into the trap of either being crazy, they're micromanaging and dictating all of the ways that you work, or lazy, they don't give you enough clarity or feedback, communication. Yeah. And so it's getting that balance in teams, particularly when you're operating in a tight environment, complex environment, hazard environment. It's super powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. In today's environment, I'm going to ask you this question. What skills and mindset do you think, because I want to go to the employee level, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because the leader level, we know that, like you said, you were just talking about that. Like you got to be clear and the stuff that I was just talking about. But from an employee level where they want to succeed, they want an opportunity to move up, they want to be a leader. Maybe they're not the best early in my career. I was very, very timid in speaking in front of people, believe it or not. But I developed that skill. I knew how to get over it. But what are some of the mindset and also skills that you believe are essential for employees to develop in today's or tomorrow's workplace, however you want to call it, to be successful and really start jumping on their career?
Yeah, it's there's another friend, Andre Martin. He wrote the book here behind me, Wrong Fit, Right Fit. He worked at Google, and Target, and Mars, and Nike, just some great brands. And in his book and in his conversations with me, he talks about knowing how to be a good team member. And actually, sometimes that's more important than knowing how to do your job, particularly if you're talking about future trajectory. So, what is it? What does it take to be a good team member? I don't think there's a universal truth to that, because different cultures, different workplaces have different requirements. But I do think some things help you understand how to be a better team member on a team. So it's like when you're in an organization, whether you're new in or you've been there a long time and you want to go forwards, you need to start asking more questions. You need to get curious. Because if you're curious and you go and talk to David's my boss, or maybe David's my boss's boss or my boss's peer, and I go and say, "Hey, David, I'm trying to get ahead here. I'd like to know how do we approach conflict? If we see something that we don't agree with in the way we're doing work, how should someone like me raise that up? How do I, that's super powerful because I'm trying to learn how to be a team member."
Clip that back. We got to clip that back. Okay, that's my sign, because that or listen back to it if you're listening to this podcast. That is so profound. Like that right there. It sounded so simple, but the way that you talked about it and approached it, just being curious and asking the right questions, and then engaging in a way that's not like, well, hey, I want to open my mouth. It's like, hey, how can I best approach it? Because we're all human. People operate, their organizations operate differently. But if you're not sure, ask those questions. That's such a great perspective. Obviously, you've done this, so But I think anyone listening to that has to listen to that back. And also, to be a great leader, you got to be a great follower sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. That's such a wise statement, David, because often we're led into this belief that the leader knows all questions, but sometimes it is just saying to your team, like, invite them to be a team member. Hey, team, this is what we're doing, but I don't know what you guys know. What are you seeing that could go wrong? Where can you prevent us as a team from a misstep? Like, I'd love to hear from you. Invite them to be team members. It creates great psychological safety, connection, mattering. It's super powerful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. This has been a great interview, Dane. I really enjoyed this. And I want to ask another question before we go, but, actually a couple. But looking ahead, okay, we talked about all this from a leadership level. We've talked from an employee level, talked about teamwork. What excites you the most about the future of work, the workplace, leadership, roles, bringing it all together, and navigating to be more efficient? What's exciting you the most?
That's normally my favorite question to ask people. So now you're putting me on the spot.
All right.
No, it's a great question, David. I think what excites me the most is just ratcheting up for way more human connection, because I think teamwork is fed by good human connection. And I think the more we have AI and technology come in and find its rightful place in the way of doing work, the more time we're going to have as humans, as team members, to be exploring, to be sharing our hopes and our aspirations, to be helping each other achieve, better health and better community outcomes, as well as bottom line impact. So that's at a high level, abstract level, what excites me. And what might that look like in a team? Like, we talk a lot about the gig economy. I'm not convinced it means that you're going to have people with 5 different jobs. I'm actually thinking more along the lines of, in my ideal world, I would love to have a team of people that I go and work with, most days, most weeks, and we just jump into different projects in different organizations. We all decided we love to surf. We all love the outdoors. We're all going to create an office in, San Clemente, California. And when we're done surfing, we're going to go and jump in and work together because we know how to work together. We love the work we do. And there's organizations out there that want our team. So I think teams may become a little more decoupled from organizations, and not gig workers, but kind of gig teams might start to happen.
It's great. What a way to close this up. Fantastic. So listen, I know you got a podcast. It's been Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNN, like, check them out. Okay. But where can people find you if they want to get in contact with, or just see what some of the work you're doing?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, LinkedIn's my favorite place to hang out. And it's me if there's a kangaroo between my first and last name. So you'll find me on LinkedIn. The podcast is The Future of Teamwork. So that's easy to find on, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We post a lot on LinkedIn. And the business leader is www.lead3r.com.
Yeah, great, man. This, again, has been a fantastic interview, and I really appreciate you being here today. And everybody out there, as I always say, do yourself a favor, especially this one. Like this show, share the show with somebody, especially someone who's running an organization or even is in an organization that's growing and they want to effectively jump up, build their skills, be more value to their organization, and also thrive. I think that's the biggest thing here, Dane, that we talk about is everything we talked about today is really just to have a stronger, thriving organization or be a stronger, thriving professional. And I appreciate your insight today. Check his company out, Lead3r. All right. And check out his podcast, as he talked about. And we appreciate you being here today, Dane.
Thanks, David. Great questions. Love the energy. And I'm going to go do some hot yoga.
Love it, man. Wealth, health, success to all of you out there. Go get a win today. Appreciate you being here. We'll see y'all next time.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.